Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and welcome our participants.
Good evening. I'm Saura Masconale, Associate Director of the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom and Professor of Political Economy and Moral Science at the University of Arizona. Welcome to the inaugural event of the new Freedom Center series on debate. An event in collaboration with the National Review Institute. Tonight, we will talk about ESG, which means environmental, social, and governance. On top of that, as an ESG scholar, there isn't much else that is clear. So that's precisely the reason we are here tonight, to try to better understand what ESG means, what are its costs and benefits, and more. And we're going to do this with a debate with two pro-ESG panelists, Andy Beher and Sandra Taylor, and two anti-ESG panelists, State Treasurer Kimberly A. and Kevin Assett. We will also have two moderators, one for each side, former White House press secretaries Ari Fleischer and Robert Gibbs. So, debate these days has become one of those suspicious words. People hear debate and they get all agitated. Well, at the Freedom Center, we believe in the value of debating with others in a civilized and open-minded way. So we're here tonight for that. We might not always find common ground, but hopefully we will learn something in the meantime. So this is what I hope you will get from tonight's event, an honest and enriching conversation about a topic that, in spite of its boring acronym, ESG, continues to occupy the pages of national newspapers, academic publications, governmental reports, and new regulation. Also, people tend to think of ESG as something that is just corporate. Corporations engage in ESG. But actually, it is a topic that has much broader implications. There are questions that go from the divide between the private and the political sphere, and then questions that concern, for example, the relationship between the federal government and the state. One more thing. In envisioning this event, I wanted to make sure that we could hear from experts from several sectors: the corporate sector, the investor sector, the regulatory sector. I mean, I'm an academic, so obviously I believe in the value of theorization. Good theories should help you foresee future contingencies and have actionable plans. But I also believe good theories should be empirically supported. And so, to do that, the first thing one should do is talk to the experts who deal with ESG day in and day out. And that's precisely what we're going to do tonight. So thank you so much again for being here. I hope you will enjoy the debate. Now, I need to wrap up because President Robbins is next, but first I have quite a few people that I would like to thank for having helped with this event. Mary Rigdon, Director of the Freedom Center, my partner in crime, thank you for your continuous support. Lindsay Craig, president of the National Review Institute, and her entire team for co-hosting with us tonight. I think our first meeting was online, July. I was in Italy, and here we are many months later, exactly according to plan. So thank you and kudos to us all. And then, of course, all of the people at the Freedom Center and Nexus Strategy Group that made sure we got here tonight. I would like to thank each of you, but we're not at the Oscars, so thank you all, and you know who you are. And with that said, it is my great pleasure to welcome University of Arizona President Robert Robbins, whom I would also like to thank for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Sora, and thank you all for being here this evening for this incredible debate at the University of Arizona's Freedom Center ESG debate. The University of Arizona is proud to host this debate because it spotlights our purpose, core values, and mission of educating adaptive problem solvers who can tackle our global society's most significant challenges. We believe multiple views should be engaged with rigor and respect. Our goal always has been and will remain teaching students how to think, not what to think, and our faculty does an incredibly great job at that. ESG refers to how companies score on these responsibility metrics and standards for potential investments. ESG encompasses a broad spectrum of beliefs and approaches, and through those differing opinions lies an opportunity for growth and mutual understanding. Fundamentally, we're talking about how companies exist and engage with our society and the world we all share. Tonight, we benefit from an evening of discourse, exploring many facets of ESG and hearing from national experts with different perspectives. In the process, we hope to gain understanding and discovery where there is common ground and where our differences of a viewpoint can be productive. The Freedom Center sought to hold this debate in Phoenix so that elected officials and community leaders could participate in this critical conversation. We also welcome all of those who have joined via our live stream, especially our University of Arizona students in Tucson and around the world. We believe tonight's debate will advance decision-making and drive progress. I believe the best debates have sharp moderators who can ensure both sides have their say and hold them accountable. This is precisely what we have tonight with two former White House press secretaries, Robert Gibbs, press secretary for President Obama, and Ari Fleischer, press secretary for President George W. Bush. And they are heavyweights in their own right. Both have managed the DC environment and engaged the press with great skill, and I know they will do a great job tonight with our distinguished debaters. I'd like to thank the Freedom Center and the National Review Institute for hosting this important debate, and I'd like to thank all of you for being with us this evening. Robert and Ari, please take it away.
First, thank you all for coming tonight. I want to say, just before I do my introductions, that, and Ari, you probably will agree with me on this, when I do a media training, the very first thing I tell somebody who's about to undergo the rigor of a media interview is, whatever you do, don't sit in a comfortable chair. So, President Robbins just said that he was looking for two sharp moderators, and we've broken the very first rule by sitting in these amazingly comfortable chairs. We even have their participants on couches. So I do hope that we will hold up to what the President talked about in terms of rigor and respect. I'm looking forward to an evening where we can have a debate and a discussion, hear both sides, and hopefully come and learn a little bit. Let me introduce to you our two participants. Andy Behar is the CEO of the nation's leading nonprofit shareholder advocacy organization, As You Sow. which has represented investors for the past 23 years to help corporations reduce material risk for all shareholders and achieve long-term sustainable growth. Sandra Taylor is the CEO of Sustainable Business International, a consulting firm she founded to assist companies with sustainability strategies after several years as Senior Vice President of Corporate Responsibility at Starbucks. She's a pioneer in CSR and sustainable agriculture focused on coffee and wine. We may need both before the night's Ari.
And I want to echo what Robert said. Thank you to all of you for being here and taking the time out of your lives to hopefully learn. That's what tonight's going to be about. This is a complicated issue. There are indeed two sides to it. And I find it refreshing that the University of Arizona and the Freedom Center and the National Review Institute are putting something together to open people's minds and do so in a civil fashion. So it's an honor, Robert, to share the stage with you. We may not agree on politics, but we do agree on chairs. I don't know how I'm getting out of this chair later on tonight. Let me introduce the panelists who are on the right side of the stage. Dr. Kevin Hassett served as the 29th chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors from 2017 to 2019. And then he returned to the White House in 2020 as a senior advisor to President Trump. He has been involved in national politics for decades. Some of you in Arizona may know of him or remember him when he was John McCain's chief economic advisor in the 2000 presidential primary, which, if I recall, was against George W. Bush in the 2000 primary. You gave us a run for our money. And he was a senior economic advisor to the campaign of President Bush then in 2004. I got to know Kevin during the course of that time. And he worked again for Senator McCain and Governor Mitt Romney when Governor Romney ran for president in 2012. He's currently managing director at the Milken Institute and Brett R. Nicholas, Distinguished Fellow of Economics at Hoover Institute at Stanford University. And if you Google his name today and hit the little button called News, you will also see rumors about Kevin. If President Trump wins, it is rumored that Kevin will become chairman of the Federal Reserve. So if you want to know which way interest rates are going, tonight's a perfect night to ask Kevin. Kimberly Yee is the elected state treasurer of Arizona. She is the state's chief banking and investment officer and oversees cash management of Arizona's $64.7 billion state budget and is in charge of making payments to agencies, local governments, schools. If she had an ATM machine with her tonight, she would not charge you $3 to make a withdrawal. Upon taking office in January of 2019, assets under management were at $15.4 billion. Today, assets under management stand at $30 billion, an increase of 95% in 52 months. Born and raised in Arizona, Treasurer Yee is the first Asian American elected to a statewide office in Arizona's history. She's also the first Chinese American Republican woman to win a major statewide office in the history of the United States. Thank you for joining. Kevin, Robert, you got the first question.
Andy, I'm going to start you off with the first question. First, I'm going to amend that you've been working with at As You Sow for 32 years, not 23. Thumbs aren't what they used to be, sorry. But ground us and set the stage for tonight, because you're representing pro-ESG with the idea that ESG is good for business and for investors. So tell us what ESG means and tell the audience tonight, ground us in this discussion as to why ESG is good for business and good for investors.
Sure, well, thank you for the question. And the title of tonight is Common Ground. And that's why I'm here, because there is a lot of common ground. I think we can all agree that we don't want to gamble with the pensions of firefighters and teachers and police officers, their nest egg, their savings. I think we can agree that we don't want big government to be imposing telling us how to invest. We want the freedom to invest. I think we can all agree, people in the audience, that we don't want another 26 days in a row of 110 degrees in Phoenix.
Wow.
I think we can all agree that we want the average American, particularly people in Florida, Louisiana, that can't get homeowners insurance now because of sea level rise, because of climate change. I think we can agree that when we go to the beach, we don't want it littered with plastic. I think we can agree that we don't want climate inflation. Chocolate doubled in price in March. The price of all the raw commodities are going up because of climate change. The thing is, what ESG is, it's very simple. It's just assessing and addressing risk. Every good business person, every successful investor assesses and addresses risk. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to invest in a company that makes t-shirts. So there's company A. Now they're looking and they're saying, wow, in Pakistan they're having these climate-induced floods. There's no cotton. And in Texas they're having climate-induced droughts. There's no cotton. What are we going to do? They're figuring it out. They're assessing and addressing risk. Company B says, we're anti-ESG. We can't look. Who do you invest in? For me, I say company A, because they got a higher probability of bringing product to market. Now the problem is, there's 18 states that have anti-ESG laws in place. They're not allowed. It is literally illegal for them to assess which company to invest in, and that's why their pension funds are underperforming against all these states that don't have those draconian laws. So there's now 145 bills in 27 states of similarly anti-ESG laws. So what you have here is big government on this side, and what you have here on the other side, the pro-ESG side, is pro-business for long-term sustainable growth. This is what it is. Again, big government over there. You've got pro-ESG that cares about business, that cares about long-term sustainable growth on this side.
Kimberly, he called you big government.
Right. I wasn't sure if I was able to laugh, but we are obviously conservatives, and we don't believe that ESG should get in the way of how a government runs its business. We consider that the free market, and it's the way we have been successful in this country. I come from a family of small business owners. In fact, just down the street, in the 1930s, we built our first business. And it was successful for 63 years. It used to be that you would open your own business, you would create a product, and you cared about the customers. You cared about the product on the market. And today, you have sort of this big government approach or woke ideology coming over and saying, well, you have to change your mission statement, you have to make the products you sell planet safe, and your consumer will have less options, and by the way, your profits will go down. That is what we are seeing with these types of ESG policies in place, and they are being put on not only by various government entities. For instance, we see that the EPA has various regulations, and we see that not only in our settings where you have the banks that decide who they want to finance and who they don't finance. That's debanking certain industries that they don't believe matter. And that is just not the free enterprise system that I know and love. And so I have taken the stance to oppose ESG as the state treasurer because, one, it's not a good investment. And beyond that, we always want to ensure that the people are first. The taxpayer, for me, is first. And you really have to take a look at your pecuniary interests when you invest. And so that is what we have done with our investment policy. We made that a priority under my administration. We have never taken into consideration non-pecuniary related issues like ESG. And our results have been fantastic. As you saw, we have increased our assets by over 100%.
So I'd like to rebut that because you say you're not big government, yet Texas State Bill 13 is an anti-ESG law. The Texas Chamber of Commerce, including Exxon, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips, put out a report 2 weeks ago that said that directly related to that law being implemented, Texas has lost $668 million and 3,000 jobs. Now, there's a bill in Arizona, SB 1195, that's being considered. And so I'm going to ask you specifically, because yes, you've done really well with your portfolio, but half of your companies have very high ESG ratings. We've checked them, we looked at the work of your staff. when that bill goes into effect, you're going to have to sell half of your portfolio. All of those, the most profitable companies are in there, have climate-related risks. They all have climate transition plans. They all have diversity, equity, inclusion. They have racial justice plans. So you're going to have to basically gut your portfolio because of SB 1195, because of big government imposing itself on you. And also, when you float your bonds, you're not going to have anybody to bid on it. That's what happened in Texas. In the first 8 months of SB 13 going into effect, well, they had banned all the banks, so nobody bid on their bonds, so they had to pay extra. They spent an extra $500 million of taxpayer money, flushing it down the toilet in extra interest. How are you going to cope with that? I'm assuming that your staff has already calculated it for 1195, because why would the legislature be considering it without seeing your report? So how are you going to handle that?
All of the bills that are being considered by the legislative body right now really don't do anything differently than what we are already doing in our investment shop. We have an internal management, investment management team at our office, and we already have in our investment policy that we always take into consideration these issues on a pecuniary factor. And those other issues that you talk about are not going to be affected by what we've already done and currently do.
The bill.
Hold on. Let's let other people get in on the conversation tonight. I'm enjoying the Andy and Kimberly show, but Robert, do you want to?
Yeah.
Your turn.
Okay, we'll come
Let me
back.
come back to this. But
But can I just read what SB 1195 states? It's a quote.
when I call you back, yes,
Okay.
you will be. But I want to ask you a question, Sandra, because one of the things the treasurer said in her initial remarks was, businesses, her family started a business with a good business plan. You were in sustainability at Starbucks way before there was this acronym of confusion, right? You were doing this well before that.
Yeah.
Take us through that, because I think it's important to understand that while this term ESG may have become political, the notion of businesses planning to protect their resources is as old, my guess is, as capitalism.
Yeah, I like to talk about corporate citizenship as a start of this, because corporate citizenship has been around for a very long time. Corporate foundations were around since the 1900s. I mean, companies would do business in communities, they'd establish a foundation, and they would do good works in the community because their employees are there. And then, of course, this corporate social responsibility. I mean, this type of work has been rebranded several times, but corporate social responsibility has come a long way from those days when it was a nice thing to do. Now I think it's a necessity, and most companies, most successful businesses believe that it's a necessity for them to do corporate social responsibility, not because somebody tells them to, but because they're stakeholders, and that's a term you're probably going to hear a lot about throughout this debate. Their stakeholders tell them that this is something they want. And these stakeholders are employees, suppliers, customers, and communities, and they all expect companies to undertake these kinds of programs. The Business Roundtable, which is an organization of well over 100 CEOs that meets in Washington, D.C., in 2018, every so many years, they decide what's the purpose of the corporation. That's part of their job and part of what they do when they meet. And they basically said in 2018 that the purpose of the corporation was no longer just providing shareholder returns, but returns for all their stakeholders. And these stakeholders, again, they decided that they would only be successful if they invested in their employees, if they dealt fairly with their suppliers, if they supported communities in which they operate. And they believe that doing these things create long-term value for their shareholders. So I think when we talk about, and all of this A lot of this has occurred when I first started working in this space. We didn't talk about ESG. We talked about what can we do to be a responsible company in the communities in which we operate and to the stakeholders that we think are very important.
Kevin, let me ask you about a story that was in Axios yesterday. And the story referred to ESG, and it measured how many times on quarterly calls done by businesses to report earnings, ESG was mentioned. And it said it is now at an all-time low, that mentions of ESG are plunging as a result of the recent backlash against ESG. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, and I think that it's actually a fun challenge for all of us on stage who celebrate, Sandra's success at Starbucks and your efforts to make wine more sustainable. And if you think about the virtuous objectives that you describe, and then to have those virtuous objectives associated with something that has become almost taboo for people to mention, then one needs to think, well, where did the ESG movement, as opposed to legitimate efforts for sustainability, go wrong? And my view is that the backlash happened as an observer, not a full-time participant in the industry as you three are, because there's a belief that I think we all share that in a democracy, that social justice, environmental justice, and so on are things that are addressed through legislative bodies, through laws, that President Obama pursued the Waxman-Markey bill on climate change and then failed, and so on. But that in a democracy that we have to advocate, as Andy does, for things that we believe in and try to convince people. And I think that what happened in the ESG movement, and this is really attributable to the efforts of Larry Fink, is that BlackRock has $10 trillion under management, and I think that ESG, big financial institutions around the world have maybe 30 trillion or so, and that with all of that money, then they've decided that they're going to use their proxies because when I invest in an index fund, then BlackRock runs it, then they have the shares that they could vote to pursue their own objectives about what they think is the justice that society should seek. And to see why people think that's so undemocratic and why people viscerally respond to it, imagine if that some big Wall Street firm that had $10 trillion was really upset about the fact that there's a division, or that church and state have to be separated in the U.S. They really wish we were a Christian nation. And they went around and they gave people Christian scores and then voted the proxy. They have 10 trillion worth of proxies, and they give people a really high score if they require Bible study at the company. Then we would object to that. They would be imposing their values. Rather than through a legislative process, you need a constitutional amendment, presumably, to start getting the separation of church and state addressed. But in an undemocratic way, these firms began to intrude on democracy, I believe. And so my view is that I celebrate what Sandra does, and she's a path-breaking person on sustainability. I celebrate that Andy communicates his values, the values that many people share, and encourages them to vote their proxies according to his objectives. But what I don't like is when there's just this giant, almost monopolist control of everybody's proxies, imposing their values not through democracy, but through the accident of them having $10 trillion of assets.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that, Kevin. Let's suppose that a fund gave out Christian scores. Nobody in this room is required to invest in it.
Correct. Oh no, I'm fine with Christian scores. I agree, but what happens?
Hold on, let me finish. So
okay.
If I don't want to invest in it, I don't have to.
Correct. And that's
so
right.
It's not a fund imposing its values on all of us. We're going to get a statement every quarter if we do invest in it. And if Ari runs a fund that's doing better, I'm struck by, one, there's freedom to invest, and two, this notion that this $30 trillion is somehow invested in something that isn't, by all of the investors in this room and in other rooms, that isn't maximizing its return. I'm confused. Your example is an interesting one. It just doesn't seem to work in any room that I've ever been in.
No, I respectfully disagree. And if you go back and read Larry Fink's original missives early on this, then and Sandra's right, like the difference between a shareholder and a stakeholder is something that they very much emphasize. And so that he's rejecting the idea that a firm should maximize value for shareholders, and that they instead, and in specific, should maximize the value for stakeholders, which include the communities and so on. And for individual firms like Starbucks, it can be really great marketing to do that. But the problem is that what BlackRock did is imposing those values that in 2020, they voted over 150,000 times against management, which was management trying to impose on management their own perspective on what social justice is, and so that's the part that I object to, and that is, what they have been doing, and now Andy, I guess, wants to disagree with me, and so the moderators can decide if he's allowed.
Can I jump in on this just for a second? Because I think there's a little misunderstanding here. So everyone in the audience probably has a 401k plan, right? So you're all invested in an index fund. That means you're invested in like 2,000 shares of stock that you have no idea what they are, because they keep it pretty hidden, other than, as you so has a, well, if you go to investorvalues.org, you can find out exactly what's inside. We update 6,000 mutual funds every month. But you've also given up your right to vote. You have handed off to Vanguard the right, your power. Most people don't even realize that they have the power. You have a mail-in ballot, and you've handed it to Vanguard that votes 98% of the time with management. Last year, BlackRock voted 93% of the time with management. That means that they're supporting excessive CEO pay. They're voting against climate risk disclosures. I mean, the most fundamental stuff. And this is actually the state of affairs, that nobody has a clue what they own because it's all hidden from you, and you've given away your power. Now, in terms of BlackRock and Larry Fink, when you're a universal owner, which means you own the entire economy, and there's a handful of companies that are harming the returns of the rest of your portfolio, it is your fiduciary duty to act upon that. Remember, the way capitalism works is that the board of directors reports to the shareholders. When you buy a share of stock, this is a property. This is like when you buy a car, you have a right to drive it. Now you have to follow rules. You got to stop at the red lights. With a share of stock, you have the right to decide who's on the board. And if the board is driving that company off a cliff, you have the right to say, you know what, I'd like to advise you. I want to report about where you're heading in the future. And this is what, well, as you said, we file a lot of shareholder resolutions. We engage hundreds of companies to try to help them to see risk that they don't see. And I'd say 70% of the companies that we engage thank us for our research, say, wow, we can go become a better company, more competitive. This is how innovation works. They're just blindsided. And so what Larry Fink is doing, he is actually doing his fiduciary duty. He's trying to get the companies that are harming the rest of the portfolio to actually start to perform better for long-term sustainable growth. Now, this is not short-term. We're going to talk about time horizon because this is ultimately what this is going to come down to. Because you got to look long-term.
Andy,
can I just say one 10-second response? But I really want to. I just think that if Larry Fink had effectively made the case that you assert that he should, then he'd still be using the words ESG. And so he was unable to effectively make the case, and my expectation is that's because the case is incorrect.
The SEC required that when the SEC changed the fund naming rule.
Let the moderators let other people.
Andy, I want to pick up on something you said, though. You talked about the responsibility of an individual and the authority of the individual to say to a board, you're driving the company off the cliff, and therefore I want to bring something to your attention. I think that gets to the nub of the matter. What's a cliff? Cliffs come in different shapes and sizes. Different people have different opinions about what's a cliff. One man's cliff could be disaster, another man's cliff is an absolutely beautiful view that they want to hike. So when it comes to defining and deciding what's a cliff for a corporation, let me put a specific question on it to you. I take it that you believe fossil fuels are driving us off the cliff, and therefore you would like to pressure institutions no longer to be investing in any entity that has fossil fuels. That's a right you have to pressure those corporations. Is it also wrong for individuals to own stocks in fossil fuels?
Well, I guess we're going to get right to the elephant in the room, which is the Exxon 2021 vote for when 3 board directors were replaced. So let me give you a little history. If you look back in 2010, ExxonMobil was losing money, the stock value was going down, 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 down. As you started filing resolutions, so did many other shareholders. And what we were saying to the company is, let's become an energy company, not necessarily an oil company. Let's start to transition. Look what they're doing in Europe. Look ahead, look at the demands. The stock kept going down, down, down. The entire energy sector underperformed the rest of the S&P 500. It dragged down all of your returns, the energy sector down. And Exxon was at the very bottom of the energy sector, dragging the energy sector down, to the point where shareholders had a majority vote in 2017, and then started to send a message to the board by saying, we no longer have confidence in you, a no confidence vote in 2018, 2019, 2020. Exxon was thrown off the Dow Industrials in September of 2020. I mean, what's a shareholder to do? This company had lost us money, had dragged down all of our returns, down, 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 down. They're thrown off the Dow. And so, well, Engine One ran some very competent directors. In fact, Exxon had no one on their board with energy experience, and frankly, they had just higher quality board directors. And so they won the vote. I mean, every shareholder makes their own decision, but I mean, one of them got a 91% vote. And now people, they say, oh, they took over Exxon, they took the Alamo. Well, guess what? From May of 2021, and you can just Google, look at their stock price, the stock's gone up. Well, yes, there's a lot of factors in that, but the bottom line is that is the job of the shareholders.
Andy, let me challenge you because you haven't answered the direct question. Is it wrong for individuals to buy shares of fossil fuel companies?
No, it's...
So you support, you have no objection to people
It's an
owning fossil
individual's
fuels.
choice, whatever they want to buy.
But it's wrong for institutional organizations to own fossil fuel companies?
No.
You would like them to divest
As
the
you
funds?
so owns Exxon, and we try to get them to, well, to become a viable organization. We think that they're heading for a cliff. We don't think that they're looking at actual demand projection. We don't think that they've acknowledged that the internal combustion engine is going to be obsolete. The rest of the world sees that. The rest of the world is look at the projections of fossil fuel demand in the future. Exxon needs to change their business model, and we have suggested ways that they could do it. That's all. I'm not saying anybody shouldn't own anything. Anyone can own whatever they like, but it is, I believe, a responsibility of shareholders to try to help companies that are heading toward a path of, well, just destruction. And also, in Exxon's case, the fact that their product is creating climate change is harming all the rest of the companies, and it is harming the entire economy globally. I mentioned, why can't you get homeowners insurance? The people in Florida.
Could the moderator stop the filibuster, please? I'm just sorry. We've got like a time here, and I haven't heard from Sandra. I'm sorry to criticize the moderators, but...
No, I just would like for us to remember we're not just talking about Exxon, number one.
Right.
And ESG really is about assessing risk. What are the environmental, what are the social and governance risks? Now, whether you like Larry Fink or not, ESG really is a way to provide not just shareholders, but all stakeholders information about the risk that they face, that companies face. I want to know what the environmental risks are that a company faces, the social risks, the governance risks. I mean, and as a result of ESG, you've seen a lot more activity, I think, at the board level, we now know, I mean, boards have become very comfortable. I've been on boards. I know how comfortable they can get and how much they support or go along with the positions of the CEO. I want boards to be independent. I want boards to think about what are the risks that this company face going forward. And I think all those stakeholders I mentioned, employees and communities and suppliers, need to understand what a lot of these risks are. I mean, there's great research on how having a woman on the board means that companies are more successful. I want to know about that. I think all shareholders should know what is happening inside the company that they should be aware of, and what are the risks, the downside risk and the upside risk.
Did you want to, yeah, Kimberly, jump in.
There's so much I could say. The first was, when we're talking about how offensive those shareholder letters were in 2020 and 2021, I read those letters, and Larry Fink's discussion made him sound like he was the king of the world. And it really was, to us, a real glance at what was happening with BlackRock. BlackRock should really be a traditional asset manager. They're a political action committee. And it really took us into a great discussion. I divested our holdings of BlackRock by 97% in February of 2022. It truly was something that we needed to do because they were going in a different direction, what I believe is a dangerous direction. And the 3% that is left, that will also be divested in a phased-in approach when we don't have any losses to the taxpayer. On the side of fossil fuels, I wrote a letter to the Biden administration and then climate czar John Kerry when he was in that seat. And I said to them that they cannot be debanking the fossil fuels industry. That's picking winners and losers. That is un-American. You cannot determine who you want to lend to and who you don't. And what's next? Ammunition, guns? Is it going to be those who have livestock? They don't want to have, whatever the list is. That is something that really dictates what the free enterprise system is all about. And that really has gone in a very wrong direction under this Biden administration. As a state treasurer, I've joined with many other state treasurers around the country, other financial officers. We believe we need to have this clarion call because it's gone too far and too fast. The consumer loses at the pump when you have this type of approach on fossil fuels. And we see that every day. We're looking at California, for instance, and they are mandating electric vehicles in the next 10 years. What am I to do in my gasoline-related vehicle? Can I drive to California in 10 years, or am I going to get dinged? Because the tourism industry is going to go down the hill in California if you have these mandates on the people. And again, it goes back to how does this affect the consumer? And we have seen it does not carry any real reality. And the consumer loses not only at the pump, as we talk about for fossil fuels, but they have less choices when they go to buy a car. And the other day, my young son asked me, how much is the average cost for a used car these days? Well, you know what? The prices have gone up because people want to go back to the old way they used to make cars. And so there is less supply on what the consumer actually wants in this day.
Let me stay with you for a second. Do you think it should even be the business of any firm or any company to fight climate change or to play any advocacy role in social policy? Andy raised the issue today of executive compensation. Isn't that a matter that should be left to companies to settle? Why isn't this the government's job and policymakers' job? Why has it become, under pressure, the job of corporations?
Well, because they can't get this legislation passed in the state legislatures or in Congress. So they've gone to the corporate boards. And I think that really is not the way to govern. We are a democracy here. So when you take a look at a business, for instance, they are trying to wear this badge of honor because that's the movement right now. And if you take a look at really where a business should be and stand firmly, it's on their products. It should be on their primary mission to run that business. And so I always say that ESG is a political scorecard. It is no longer a financial scorecard, and we have to move away from that. I do believe that people are moving away from it.
Yeah, well, let me just follow up on that, because one of the reasons California wants more electric cars is, as Kevin mentioned earlier, he wants leaders in political positions to make political decisions. And the state of California made a series of decisions to comply with a federal law, the Clean Air Act, that had been passed in the 70s, that really wasn't working for them with all the smog and all the cars. So they passed a law to increase at a state level their corporate average fuel economy, their fuel standards. Certainly there's nothing wrong with a state doing that, and there's nothing wrong then with a company who wants to do business in the 5th largest economy in the world wanting to sell cars, making cars that fit with regulation. One of the biggest things that Deloitte just did a study on that corporations that are invested in sustainable investing, their number one reason is they're dealing with regulation. That can't be wrong that California is doing that, right?
Well, why are all of the people moving away from California? We see it here.
I mean, just to be honest,
We
there's
are
like
a
45 million people that live there.
We're a
you know?
high-growth state.
I mean,
That
I
was
appreciate
before the
that-
debate began. We got another million.
Yeah.
Me and Andy.
Yeah.
They're fleeing because they don't like the regulation in California. They don't like the high taxes.
But-
They
and that's
want to
their-
live freely.
And that's their right.
That's the American way.
But that's their right. But if you did stay, and you understood what the laws were, and you agreed with the laws, and you thought, you know what, it'd be really nice to go look at Ari's Cliff that you want to hike and actually be able to see it for use this smog. That's nothing wrong with that, right?
There is nothing wrong when it goes through the proper channels. Any type of, I mean, I'm a former legislator. You're going to have lots of different laws. You're going to agree with some, you're going to agree with, you're not going to agree on some. That is the way we have representative government, right? And so if it's going through the proper channels, if it did that, in California, that's what they are going to live with. But they aren't doing that in many of these situations. They are actually going through by way of the Biden administration's EPA, for instance. And the EPA's regulations are really, they are tying the hands of real people, real American families. We are being told what kind of stove to have in our kitchen. We are being told what type of food we're allowed to eat. And our poor farmers out there, take a look at the farmer. It used to be that they would say their biggest threat might be Mother Nature, or perhaps it is pestilence. But their biggest threat today for the average farmer is ESG.
The biggest threat today for farmers is climate change. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's
Lack
it's
of
not
water.
ESG. It's drought, it's pests that live longer in the winter because of climate change. I mean, there are a whole range of things. That's not the biggest threat for farmers.
Have you talked to a farmer?
I
There's
talk
a lot
to
of
farmers
farmers.
all the time. That's all I do. I talk to coffee farmers, I talk to vineyard managers, and I talk to farmers generally in all over the world, and they have the same concern. They're concerned about a lot of the weather patterns are totally unpredictable. They've lost, I was just mentioning earlier to some people that the British Columbia lost its entire wine vintage this year, the entire vintage, because of climate change. So I'm not talking about government policy. That's what everybody seems to be talking about. I'm talking about business and decisions that business makes based on risk. And ESG is just one way for risk to be assessed. It's not the only way that companies can assess risk, but it's not about government policy.
I believe in the freedom for a farmer to farm. And when they have these types of regulations that say, you have too much livestock, you have to decrease the numbers. You have others saying that, you can't have this type of feed. That is something that goes beyond, the free system of what farmers should be able to do. They have an industry, they need to run it the way that works for them. This hurts, more importantly, it hurts the farmers that are small and medium sized. And they're just trying to make it. But because of these overburdensome government regulations, they can't do business the way they used to.
Sandra, let me
follow up
with
with
you.
Can I get in on this?
Well, I just want to say one thing, and then I'll let you go. Those are certainly your opinions. I do want to get us grounded back again in ESG, because livestock numbers for farmers through some EPA regulation, if that actually exists, is not part of the topic that we're talking about tonight. Go ahead, Ari.
Can I just correct one
Hold on,
thing?
Sandra, I've got a question for Sandra.
Okay.
You come from a corporate background, and you address these issues in a very corporate manner about corporate behavior and what's better or worse for society. JP Morgan, BlackRock, State Street, they all just announced that they were leaving the Climate Action 100 group, which is the leading investor engagement initiative on climate change. Does it trouble you that corporate America is increasingly walking away from the things that you espouse, and why are they doing that in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I don't think corporate America is walking away. I mean, when we talk about BlackRock and investor advisors or investors, that's not the same thing as a corporation that I'm referring to. So I don't think that, I think corporations
So you don't think there's a backlash that corporations are also receiving and are backing off of their commitments on ESG?
No, I don't think that, no. Because I think companies have already, what companies do is they decide what's material to our business, and that's a financial term, but it has been co-opted, I think, by sustainability executives and managers. What's really material for our business from an environmental perspective, from a social perspective, based on the type of product they make? I worked for consumer products companies, so it's fairly easy for consumer products companies to identify what's material from a consumer perspective. Some companies are B2B, but every company that has a concern around sustainability is assessing what's important for us. What do we need, not what's important for some other company or for investors. Now, the one good thing about ESG, I think, inside companies is that it brought the sustainability teams that were often, off to the side, doing good works, giving away money in communities, often really pushing to get attention inside companies. It partnered them with the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, because now investors were concerned about sustainability. From my perspective, that was very good, because now you've got investors telling the CFO, we want to know more about your sustainability programs. A lot of the ESG reports, they looked at sustainability reports. Now, a lot of those reports have been combined with the annual report because, frankly, the annual financial report has a lot more rigor and discipline than some of the sustainability reports that companies release. So I think that the combination or the partnership, removing this barrier between the financial team and the sustainability team has been really good. And that is a result of ESG. I think whether Larry Fink goes away or whether they stop their programs, you will see companies continue to function in this way because it's material to their business and their future.
Thank you.
Kevin, a couple people have mentioned the business roundtables, I think 2019 announcement. That broadened, as Sandra I think started, but broadened the stated purpose of a corporation to serving, quote, all our stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, as well as shareholders. Why was that wrong? Why, and if you think it is wrong, and 181 CEOs signed that stakeholder capitalism, if you think it was wrong, why do you think you can run JP Morgan Chase better than Jamie Dimon can?
I think that if I were one of the CEOs at that time in that organization, then I might well have signed as well. Because if you refused to, then you would have become a target of Larry Fink and the proxy folks. And I just want to go back, because I know that as we get closer to the end, we're looking for things that we agree to. And I think that going back to Andy really hit the nail on the head, that when I think about it, that I've been telling people forever that you should don't pick individual stocks, you're not going to outperform the market, invest in mutual funds and so on. And that's what I've done too. And when I get that note from the mutual fund company saying, can we vote your shares or do you want to do it yourself, then I'm always like, yeah, you guys go ahead. And so I've never tried to vote. And so I think that what's kind of happened is that there's been this unintended consequence of this, is like the successful democratization of finance, and there's so many people that are now doing that sort of correct investing rather than trying to get in and out and so on, that it's created this problem that reached a sort of peak when Larry was at his worst and is now self-correcting, it looks like, in the market. But there's definitely a time like where if you're a CEO and you come out and you campaign visibly against an ESG movement that at its peak was like incredibly socially important in terms of the media, then you're picking a fight that you probably shouldn't. And so I could see why they would do that. They basically wanted to get the hounds off their back, and they signed the thing, and then they went back to maximizing profits. But as an economist, I could just sort of say that again, given the rules that the government sets, that I want a firm that maximizes profits, and that's like the heart of the free enterprise system, and it always has been. And if there's a firm that's maximizing something other than profits, then its profits aren't going to be as high, by definition. The one thing about that would be that perhaps there are people that understand better than the CEO like what the proper horizon is for planning and so on, and that we think CEOs are collectively making mistakes. But I don't think that that's a position where somebody who hasn't run a company should like try to insert themselves. So I can see why they would have signed it. And you don't want to pick fights you don't have to. And we've seen some companies that in the last couple of years have picked fights that they shouldn't have, and they've really suffered for it. And so I think that that's probably why they did it.
And you wanted to get in on this.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, seriously?
Yeah, I'm serious about everything.
No, come on. You think that the CEO of Exxon, Chevron, JP Morgan, every major company was pressured by non-binding shareholder resolutions. Now, just so you understand, when you file a shareholder resolution, even if you get a 90% vote, the company doesn't have to do it, okay? These are non-binding. You think that they're that threatened by it? I don't think so. The reason that they signed it is because the failure of Milton Friedman economics. The markets had shifted. It wasn't working. Everyone's looking around and going, like, Milton Friedman told us that we could abuse our employees, we could have slavery in supply chain, we could dump in the commons, we could externalize all of our costs. And it wasn't working. We have climate change, our oceans are filled with plastic, our society is being ripped apart. And so the total failure of Milton Friedman economics was evident to 181 of the biggest companies in the world. And they said, you know what? The way that works is we take care of our employees. The most expensive thing for a company is replacing an employee who leaves. We want to attract and retain the best and the brightest. It makes sense economically. We don't want to poison our customers. We want to take care of our customers. We don't want to dump in the commons. If you're a company and you dump toxic waste from your factory into the river, you might save a few bucks for a few months, but then your own employees drink it, they don't show up at work, and then you get sued. It comes back to bite you. I mean, well, just last week, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they saved a couple of pennies on the price of sugar. But then this expose came out that they were using slavery in their supply chain in India. They're going to take hundreds of millions of dollars to rehabilitate their brand. This is Milton Friedman at his peak. Just do
Kevin,
anything you can to make a buck.
Kevin, I'm going to give you 45 minutes to defend Milton Friedman.
I just want to say that
it's failed. It's done.
It won't. No, it would not take that. But I just want to say to start with that I was friends with Milton, and I'm honored to be and used to have lunch and dinner with him all the time. I've been reading his work throughout my career. I understand why he won the Nobel Prize, which he richly deserved, and he did not argue that firms should be dumping pollution in rivers or should abuse their workers. That's
externalized
an utter mischaracterization of Milton Friedman. And I really don't think that insulting Milton Friedman on stage while we're talking about ESG and trying to find common ground is an appropriate debate strategy.
All right,
I don't think I insulted him.
I want to come right back to I like elephants in rooms. Maybe because I'm a Republican, I do like elephants. At the core of this is the belief, the conviction that climate change is going to be the end of humanity. It seems to me that there are many who ardently believe that, and they want public policy and corporate policy and social policy to protect the earth from this happening. My question is, if we do everything that these pressure campaigns want to achieve, if we are able to stop fossil fuel production, switch to solar, switch to wind, switch to renewables, will it do any good anyway? You talked earlier about drought. My question is, if we do everything that the climate lobby is asking for, will we really stop drought? Will we really stop fluctuations in the weather? Will we really achieve the goals, or will we make the American people pay an inordinate price for our way of life while China and India continue to do everything that they're doing, and the Americans bear the burden of it to effect no good because we can't stop what's happening in nature anyway? That's my question.
To me or to Sandra?
Whoever would like that one. I'll be
Well,
very
first of
fair.
all, it's not just
Sandra, you now get 45 minutes to rebut his 45-minute question.
it's not just the United States. I mean, this is happening all over the world. When I talk to farmers, so this is happening to farmers everywhere. It's not just the United States. That's number one. And I mean, I'm going to answer the question I want to answer, and that is around the Business Roundtable. I mean, the Business Roundtable was, I have CEOs, clients who say, I interviewed all these young Harvard Business School graduates, and they each wanted to know, what's your signature giving program? We don't have a signature giving program, should we? So I think a lot of this is coming from employees and potential employees.
But the
young
question is, if
people.
you get everything you want to have accomplished, will it do any good? What will be the end result of all these changes in society? Will you stop climate change?
Well, I'm not just talking about climate change. I mean, I'm talking about
I'll take that half.
corporations that have a purpose. I'm not just talking about stopping climate change. And I frankly don't know. If I knew, I'd be somewhere else, you know, spending my $10 million if I knew the answer to that question. I think we can adapt and mitigate the impact of climate change. I know that's certainly the case in some agricultural sectors, that you can take steps to mitigate the impact of climate change. But I can't predict that this will stop climate change. But when I talk about sustainability, I'm not just talking about climate change. I'm looking at a whole host of environmental and social issues that we face and that companies have a direct relationship with or impact on, and that is where I think we need to be looking.
Robert, can I come in and in a surprising way on this and support of Sandra? I'm just saying that when you see the strong emotions about ESG and climate change and so on, that it's important to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the person who has strong emotions and think about where they come from. And if I believed that there was an asteroid coming to destroy the Earth, and I really believed it, and I was sure, then it would be wrong for me not to do everything I can to try to save the Earth. And this is, I think, when you're trying to understand where did Larry Fink's original impetus come from, that I think you're right to say that probably a lot of it was motivated especially by climate, and you've been mentioning climate. And so you might disagree about climate, and maybe I disagree about climate, but I think that the strong emotions come from the genuine, earnest belief that many people have that there's an asteroid headed for the Earth. And if you really believe that it's irresponsible not to try to do everything you can to stop it.
Yeah.
Have any of you read the IPCC reports? I mean,
Sure.
Okay, we've got 98% of the world, the planet's scientists saying that, okay, you got 1.5, you got 2, and then estimates of what's going to happen if we get to 3, if we get to 4. And I mean, Ari, we have to just do everything that we can because it's literally the end of global economy. I mean, it's sea level rise, it's cities going under. I mean, it's not just getting homeowners insurance in Florida, there's going to be, I mean, the IPCC is estimating hundreds of millions of climate refugees, and you already see there's over 100 million climate refugees now. And areas of Africa are no longer arable for farming. People are fleeing. You talk about yes, we have to do what we can. And here's the thing, it's also going to be not only good for business, it's going to be great for American business. It's going to unleash amazing innovation. That's what we do best. It's going to build jobs. It's going to actually transform into what we call a regenerative economy. Right now we're in an extractive economy. We extract labor. We extract from the earth. there's this massive amount of abundance on the other side. If we can all work together, find common ground, and find a glide path into a regenerative economy that's based on justice and sustainability, long-term sustainable growth. There is a way forward that is absolutely positive, that we can feed the world, that we can actually get this under control. But you guys are moving in the wrong direction. You're moving backwards. You're trying to go for a time. You're using, again, heavy hand of state government to try to crush the invisible hand of the markets, and the markets are moving this direction. That is why stakeholder capitalism was adopted by basically every single corporation, not only in the United States, but then, and we, just one last thing, in Europe, the new regulations that are coming out, there's 49,000 companies that are all getting ready to actually start to embrace these ideas, to actually start to do more sustainability. And investors want to know, because you want to put your money into those companies because they are going to be the ones that are going to thrive in this new economy.
Somebody over there want a minute? If not, I was going to pick up on Kevin's nice idea on common ground. Kevin, you're on a roll on common ground. Anything else you've heard tonight that you think all sides can agree on?
Yeah, I think that all sides should be able to agree that it would be really important if we could organize shareholders to vote their proxies according to their wishes and take away the sort of extreme accidental market power of a few big companies. And that I think that informing people about sustainability, or whether the firm finances abortion, or whatever it is that's your favorite thing that you want to vote with your shares about, that it'd be great if we could organize folks to do that. And I've seen a few efforts, entrepreneurial efforts, to create apps on your phone where you get to actually vote your own proxies. And you sign up and then you say, yeah, from now on I'm going to vote. And I think we might all agree that taking the power away from a few big companies, which is where I started, it was the thing that really, I want democracy to work, and your speech could be a great campaign speech. You should run for office, right, that you just gave. But that's the way I would like it to work.
So we've got agreement on shares. I mean, I'm reminded.
Can I agree too? Because As You Sow
Yes,
happens to
you
have
have,
such an app.
you have,
Yeah,
yes.
As You Vote, go to asyouvote.org, and all of you who have your own shares that you're probably not voting, because 20% of every ballot doesn't get voted. You're throwing away your mail-in ballot. Asyouvote.org, one click, and you can vote in an ESG-aligned way. You can vote for a sustainable, livable planet.
I'm reminded that I got an email in my inbox today before this debate that said the same thing. You own, Ari, to your cars and fossil fuel question, I own some shares in Ford, and it asked me to fill out the form and vote my shares. So I don't have many, too many years in the public sector, but yes.
For that to happen, I agree that's a good place to start. But shareholders need to be educated. I mean, they don't understand. They get the proxy in the mail. They don't know what it means. They don't understand how their vote will be used. They don't even think their vote will make a difference. They think that boards of directors are going to make their decisions without reference to what shareholders want.
Yeah. I do think, just as a news aside, because I think, Kevin, one of the points you're making is a lot of funds or a lot of shares are held by institutional investors, right? Mm-hmm. They may hold 10, 12, 7, 8%. It was interesting today to watch the back and forth, and has been over the past few months, with Disney, mm-hmm. because Disney is, unlike most companies, a majority or a huge chunk of its shareholders are what you would consider mom and pops, people that have thought, I went to Disney, it was great, I'll buy a few shares, I'll buy a share of the company, watch it happen.
The shares are beautiful, by the way. They actually will give you the share, and it's got all the characters on it. Anyway, you should go buy a share and actually get the share.
So again, it gives you an example that there are these proxy battles that are going on where individuals are exercising their right and picking the direction of the company.
Did you want to get on this, Kimberly? On common ground?
On common ground, we really just have to go back. It's the people first. And you have to go back. For me, it's the taxpayer first. It's not my money, it's their money. And in my office, it's always safety before liquidity before yield. So you're always having to look at your returns, your bottom line. On the same side of business, you're always looking at the consumer. Who is your customer? Do you want them back in your door? And if you do, you've got to look at their needs. Their needs are choices. We live in America. We want to be able to have options. But with this type of a movement or approach, it changes names all the time. We really have to take a look at what the cost is. And when you took a look at what Unilever, Ben & Jerry's, for instance, did when they boycotted Israel, it was a real movement. And I immediately divested $143 million down to zero because they were our friend. I mean, Israel is our partner, our trade partner, our friend. And when a company decides to go in that direction of a social direction, a political direction, it absolutely affects the consumer. When I'm not the state treasurer, I'm a mom. I'm going to go shop on the products that I believe in, the values that are in my core. And I passed that Ben & Jerry's refrigerated section every single time because of it. But what happened with that was the lesson. My divestment started a movement of other states also divesting from Unilever, Ben & Jerry's. And in the course of about a year, I got a call from Unilever, Treasurer Yee, would you like to reinvest with us again? They had sold their subsidiary in the West Bank to an Israeli manufacturer of ice cream. So they changed their course of action. And that really was what I saw, the movement that needs to happen. Divestments matter when you're standing up for the taxpayer, when you're standing up for the person first. And for me, I thought that was something that many states saw and learned from, and we saw the result of it.
Sandra, anything you want to add the
list.
last word here?
But I haven't done my list of common ground.
I'll defer to my colleague.
Thank you.
And his long list. It is long.
Yeah, how about we do this?
No,
Because
I'll do it fast.
I know. Well,
Like 1 minute.
We're at the home. We're at the home of the Final Four, and the shot clock is winding down. So, take a robust 30 seconds.
Beautiful. We don't want big government imposing its will. We want the freedom to invest. So we got to stop those 145 bills in 27 states that are going to be crushing the economy of those states and harming firefighters' pension funds. We agree we don't want 26 days in a row of 110 degrees here in Phoenix. We agree we want Americans in Florida and Louisiana to have homeowners insurance. We agree when we go to the beach, we don't want it littered with plastic. We want board independence. A CEO should not be the chairman. People cannot have oversight over themselves. We want to attract and retain the best and the brightest employees. We don't want excessive
5
CEO
seconds.
pay. We don't want people making
Shoot the
the same
ball.
amount as the average employee
ball.
makes in 300 years.
All right.
Okay.
This is one of the most brilliant presentations I've ever heard of an individual's wish list, which begins with the word we. We agree. We.
How can you not?
These are interesting, provocative thoughts. But I do think what we've shown, this is a conversation that touches deeply because it involves so much of our individual lives, our individual decisions, based on freedom for where we want our money to go, but it also touches on the future direction of where we want our country and the world to go. And I think that's where the argument lies. Because where one man or one woman's future is different from another person's future. It's one thing for the government to set a policy, we won't fund this, we won't fund that, government speak for people. The line here is corporations. Do they have that similar responsibility? How far should a corporation go in saying this is right for society, this is wrong, this is right for so-called social justice, this is wrong? I think here you start getting into areas that divide and split the American people. Government is the proper place because we can vote government people in and out far easier than we can through corporate America. And I think that's the difference we see here. But I also think you can just hear it in everybody's voice. You want to improve this country. And I think that's clear. And I think people in this audience, I hope you've learned how to improve the country. You're the decision makers in Arizona. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you to all the panelists.
Is this on? Okay, here we go. I'm going to come right up here. Well, thank you all so much. Oh, we're going to put the podium up. I want to thank all of you for such a wonderful presentation. This is a wonderful way to have us all come together. I'd also just like to say that we certainly owe you a debt of gratitude for continuing the great tradition of civil debate and discussion. I'd also like to thank Sarah and Mitch for organizing this terrific event, and to Stephanie Cates on the NRI team for all of your contributions in putting this together. On behalf of all of us, though, I want to thank you, the audience, for coming here tonight and for watching us online. We appreciate your interest. It makes a difference when you raise your hand and you actually come to participate. And a special thank to the events team here at the University of Arizona, to our AV team, and all the people who are making our refreshments. This is what helps put together a flawless program, people who care about all the details. As many of you know, National Review Institute was founded by Bill Buckley as the nonprofit organization to support the editorial mission of the magazine. Our core mission at NRI is to preserve and promote the legacy of Bill Buckley, and we directly do this by supporting National Review talent like Kevin Hassett, and we are also building programs to amplify their work. Although he had a well-formed point of view, Bill Buckley had a special ability to bring people together. He knew the importance of engaging with those with whom you agree, as well as those with whom you do not. He knew that you could look a person in the eye, welcome them in with warmth and wit and good cheer, and a few barbs here and there, engaging in debate with respect. This is the National Review tradition, and it is a very important part of Bill Buckley's legacy. NRI aims to engage and persuade our fellow citizens with dynamic programs to highlight this, like tonight's debate. There are no fewer than 1,500 firing line episodes featuring a wide variety of guests, many of whom opposed Bill's views. And it is in this spirit that we joined with the University of Arizona's Freedom Center for tonight's debate with these esteemed guests. A wide variety of perspectives and positions, as we saw on the ESG topic, provides you all, the audience, and I think also our speakers here tonight, with a fuller picture of this important topic. So thank you all for participating, to our speakers, our moderators, our organizers, and to all of our audience here. Bill Buckley, as I mentioned, felt that debate was a very important way to learn. And we want to always continue to learn. We're here at an academic institution, and our organization wants to continue to help to educate. So if you're interested in learning more about National Review Institute, please see us during the reception or go online at nrinstitute.org. We look forward to connecting with you. And I hope that we can partner with the Freedom Center again soon. So until next time, thank you all.